Marcus Hale always said the worst sound in the world wasn't thunder, wasn't sirens, wasn't even the judge telling you your marriage was over. It was the crunch of expensive tires on gravel when rich people came looking for something they thought they already owned. 3 days after I buried my uncle, a white Range Rover rolled on my driveway, like it paid taxes there, and out stepped a woman in pearl-colored tennis clothes carrying a leather folder against her chest like she was delivering divorce papers from God himself. "You must be Marcus," she said, smiling the way snakes probably smile before they bite. "I'm Cynthia Mercer, president of Blackwater Cove HOA, and we need to discuss the marina you illegally inherited." I remember staring at her for a second, still smelling funeral flowers on my jacket, thinking, "Lady, I haven't even figured out where my uncle kept the coffee filters yet." But she already wanted the lake. The crazy part is, she had no idea the entire neighborhood's access to that lake depended on land sitting directly underneath my docks. And by the time she figured it out, it was already too late. 6 months earlier, my life looked nothing like this. I was 46, divorced, broke enough to calculate whether buying name-brand cereal counted as financial recklessness, living in a one-bedroom apartment outside Toledo with water stains on the ceiling shaped like continents. My ex-wife kept the house, the furniture, most of my dignity, and honestly, I couldn't even blame her. Somewhere along the line, I'd turned into one of those men who stare at microwaves while waiting for frozen dinners like it's a campfire. Then Uncle Vernon died. Vernon Hale was family technically, but growing up he was more myth than man. Everybody in Michigan's North Shore communities knew him as the stubborn old guy who lived alone on Ashpine Lake and fought with HOA boards like it was a competitive sport. He wore flannel year-round, drank coffee black enough to remove paint, and trusted absolutely nobody wearing loafers without socks. At the funeral, maybe 12 people showed up, and half of them looked nervous even being seen there. One old fisherman leaned over during the burial and muttered, "Your uncle spent 20 years keeping vultures away from this lake." At the time, I thought he meant geese or developers or something. Turns out, he meant Cynthia Mercer. The lawyer read the will in an office that smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. "Mr. Hale," he said, sliding documents toward me, "your uncle left you the residence, 2.3 acres of shoreline property, and full ownership of the marina." I blinked. The what? 8-slip marina. Operational permits included. Significant value, actually. I almost laughed because the only boat I'd ever owned was a busted canoe from Craigslist. But then he explained what waterfront rights meant. Underwater ownership, dock control, shoreline access. Things rich people apparently go homicidal over. 2 days later, I drove north. And man, the place hit me harder than I expected. The cabin sat tucked between towering pine trees, overlooking clear blue water that looked too perfect to be real. The air smelled like cedar and cold lake wind. Wind chimes clicked softly on the porch while old fishing rods leaned against the wall like retired soldiers. For the first time in years, my chest loosened a little. I remember standing on the dock at sunset thinking, maybe this place could save me. Then Cynthia showed up. She marched across my driveway in spotless white sneakers while 2 nervous HOA board members followed behind her carrying clipboards like backup dancers. "Blackwater Cove maintains strict residential standards," she announced before even saying sorry for your loss. "Commercial marina operations are prohibited under current community expectations." Community expectations. God, rich people love phrases that sound polite while meaning we'll ruin your life if you don't obey us. She opened the leather folder and handed me papers claiming the marina belonged to the HOA under some historic shared use understanding. Translation: sign it over for $1 a year or prepare for war. I looked at her. My uncle owned these docks for 40 years. Her smile tightened. Your uncle was difficult, and difficult people eventually lose. One of the board members actually looked embarrassed hearing her say that out loud. But Cynthia didn't care. She stepped closer, lowering her sunglasses just enough for me to see the ice underneath. Mr. Hale, families come here for peace, stability, property values. Men like your uncle brought conflict. We'd hate for history to repeat itself. There it was. Not really about docks. Not really about rules. People like Cynthia always need a villain so they can pretend they're heroes protecting civilization from barbarians who wear work boots. That night, I sat inside Vernon's workshop while rain tapped softly against the windows and started digging through his old files. At first, it was mostly receipts, maintenance logs, fishing licenses. Then I found the journals. Stacks of them. Every interaction documented in careful handwriting. Dates, threats, lawsuits, names of families pushed out of the neighborhood after resisting the HOA. One entry stopped me cold. Cynthia thinks ownership comes from intimidation, but she still doesn't know who controls the lake access easement. If she ever finds out, she'll panic. My pulse actually sped up reading that. I kept flipping pages. More notes. More diagrams. Then finally, buried between property maps, a sentence underlined twice in red ink. The marina sits on privately owned submerged land. Without easement renewal, Blackwater Cove loses legal lake access entirely. I leaned back slowly in Vernon's creaking chair while thunder rolled outside across the water. Suddenly, Cynthia's desperation made sense. This wasn't just greed. This woman was terrified, and whatever secret my uncle died protecting, I had just inherited it too. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of engines. Not one engine, three. I looked through the cabin window, still half asleep, coffee mug in my hand, and saw a county inspection truck pulling into my driveway, followed by a sheriff's SUV, and right behind him Cynthia Mercer's white Range Rover creeping along like a shark circling bloody water. The woman really traveled with an audience. I stepped outside into cold morning air carrying that bitter smell of pine and wet dirt after rain, and before I could even speak, a heavy-set guy in a county jacket climbed out holding a clipboard. "Marcus Hale?" he asked. "County Compliance Office. We received multiple complaints regarding illegal shoreline modifications, unsafe electrical installations, and unauthorized commercial activity." Behind him, Cynthia leaned casually against her vehicle sipping coffee, like she was watching live entertainment she'd paid for. "Just routine procedure," she called sweetly, though her smile looked almost excited. "We all have to follow community standards." I swear, if fake concern burned calories, that woman would have disappeared into dust. But something unexpected happened. The inspector guy named Walter Briggs glanced back towards Cynthia, waited until she got distracted talking to the deputy, then lowered his voice. "Your uncle used to fish with my dad," he muttered quietly. "Good man. Kept records on everybody." That caught my attention immediately. "Records?" Walter nodded once. "You're not the first person she's done this to." Then he went back to acting official before Cynthia noticed. For the next 2 hours, they inspected everything. Dock supports, electrical panels, septic lines, fuel storage, and the entire time Cynthia hovered nearby, pretending she wasn't eavesdropping. But every few minutes I caught Walter giving me little looks like he already knew the whole game. Finally, he closed his clipboard. "Nova Velasquez." Cynthia's smile vanished so fast it was almost funny. "That can't be right," she snapped. Walter shrugged. "Everything's permitted and up to code." "Check again." "Ma'am," he said flatly, "this isn't Yelp. I don't get to invent problems because you dislike your neighbor." I nearly laughed out loud right there. Cynthia's jaw tightened so hard I thought veneers might crack. As they drove away, Walter lingered long enough to say one more thing. "Your uncle kept copies of the marina office, too. Hidden compartment under the tackle bench." Then he left. The moment their vehicles disappeared down the road, I headed straight for the old marina shack. It smelled like mildew, gasoline, and ancient coffee grounds, basically every fishing dock in America. I found the tackle bench, crawled underneath, and sure enough, hidden panel. Inside sat 3 thick binders and a stack of sealed envelopes. Vernon really had been preparing for war. I spent the rest of the afternoon reading until my eyes hurt. Cynthia hadn't just harassed people. She'd systematically hunted them. One family got buried under violation fines until they sold. Another got sued over visual disturbances because their grandson's wheelchair ramp supposedly lowered neighborhood aesthetics. One older couple lost their home after Cynthia's husband suddenly denied refinancing through his bank. Every story ended the same way. Scared families leaving, shell companies buying lakefront property cheap, then magically reselling it 2 years later for double the price. And Cynthia's fingerprints were all over every single deal. But buried inside those files sat the real bombshell. Blackwater Cove, HOA had signed a shoreline easement agreement back in 2001 allowing community lake access through Vernon's submerged property. In exchange, the HOA owed annual payments to the landowner. Payments Cynthia stopped making 6 years ago. According to Vernon's notes, if the agreement defaulted beyond 12 consecutive months, lake access rights terminated automatically. I actually sat there staring at that sentence while the old marina fan rattled overhead. 32 luxury homes depended on that easement. Without it, their private beach, docks, and boat launches legally disappeared overnight. Which meant Cynthia wasn't trying to steal my marina because she wanted extra money. She was trying to erase the only document capable of collapsing her entire little kingdom. Suddenly, all her panic made perfect sense. 2 days later, the harassment campaign escalated hard. First came violation notices taped to my door. Excessiva docnuis. Improper garbage placement. Aggressive dog behavior. I didn't even own a damn dog. Then my marina renters started showing up looking nervous. Older guy named Leonard approached me while I was repairing cleats near Slip 3. Marcus, he sighed awkwardly. The HOA sent letters threatening fines if we keep renting from you. For what? Supporting unauthorized commercial activity. I stared at him. Leonard, your boat has been parked here 15 years. I know. He rubbed the back of his neck miserably. But Cynthia makes life difficult when people cross her. That sentence stuck with me. Not illegal. Not impossible. Just difficult. That was her whole strategy. Death by paperwork. Death by stress. Death by making ordinary people too exhausted to fight back. That night, I called an attorney recommended by Walter Briggs. Her name was Naomi Cross, and she sounded like somebody who billed by the syllable. Sharp, calm, dangerous. After reviewing the easement documents, she went quiet for almost 10 seconds. Mr. Hale, she finally said, do you understand what you're sitting on here? Not entirely. Your property controls legal lake access for nearly 40% of Blackwater Cove. Seriously? Yes. And based on these missed payments, the HOA may currently owe you close to $200,000. I nearly dropped the phone. Naomi continued. There's more. Cynthia Mercer's husband shares First Peninsula Bank, correct? Yeah. Interesting coincidence then, because the bank holds mortgages on over half the homes inside Blackwater Cove. Suddenly my stomach sank. Meaning if lake access disappears, property values collapse, and the bank loses millions. There it was. The real reason Cynthia was desperate enough to fake violations and intimidate grieving people. This whole community sat on a financial house of cards balanced directly on top of Vernon Hale's underwater property rights. And now those rights belong to me. The next morning, I sent certified letters to every homeowner in Blackwater Cove. Not threats. Facts. Copies of the easement agreement. Missed payment records. Documentation showing Cynthia collected marina maintenance fees from residents for years despite never forwarding the money to Vernon. By sunset, the neighborhood basically exploded. My phone rang nonstop. Some people were furious. Others terrified. A few secretly supportive. One woman actually whispered into the phone, "Thank God somebody's finally standing up to her." But Cynthia absolutely lost her mind. Around 8 p.m., her Range Rover came flying into my driveway, so fast gravel sprayed across the porch. She stormed out without even closing the driver's door. "What the hell have you done?" she shouted before reaching the steps. I stayed seated in my porch chair, holding a beer. "Evening, Cynthia. You mailed legal documents to private residents. They seemed relevant. You're creating panic." "No," I said calmly. "I think your unpaid bills created panic." Her face changed then, not anger anymore. Fear. Pure naked fear, flickering underneath all that polished country club confidence. And honestly, that scared me more than the screaming. Because powerful people only panic when the truth can actually destroy them. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You have no idea how complicated this situation is. Then explain it. Some things are bigger than property lines." "Funny," I replied, taking another sip. "That's exactly what your lawyer said to my uncle before he died." For a second I thought she might slap me. Instead, she stared out toward the dark lake, breathing hard. Then finally she whispered something almost to herself. "Vernon was supposed to sell years ago." That sentence hung in the night air between us while dock lights shimmered across the water. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just corruption anymore. This was desperation wrapped in designer sunglasses. Cynthia turned back toward me, eyes cold again. "You should have taken the $1 offer, Marcus." I smiled slowly. "You should have paid your bills." Then she got back in her Range Rover and drove off into the dark like somebody fleeing a crime scene. And deep down, I had a feeling the real war hadn't even started yet. By the end of that week, Blackwater Cove looked less like a wealthy lakeside community and more like a neighborhood waiting for a hurricane to make landfall. People stopped waving at each other. HOA board members suddenly avoided eye contact in public. Expensive patio conversations got quieter when I walked past. And Cynthia Mercer, she started unraveling in ways only dangerous people do when they realize control is slipping through their fingers. It began with small things. Someone spray-painted "private property thief" across my dock in dripping red letters one night. 2 days later, piles of broken concrete mysteriously appeared near my shoreline, like somebody wanted environmental inspectors to think I'd been dumping debris into the lake. Then came the anonymous police complaints. Threatening behavior, aggressive conduct, public intimidation. One deputy actually apologized while handing me a copy of the report. Off the record, he muttered awkwardly, "This smells political as hell." The crazy thing is, I almost felt sorry for Cynthia at first. Almost. Because once you look past the designer jackets and fake confidence, you could tell she was terrified. Not of me specifically, of losing the machine she'd built. Turns out when your entire identity depends on controlling everybody around you, truth becomes radioactive. Then Naomi Cross called me on a rainy Thursday afternoon with the kind of voice lawyers get when they're trying very hard not to sound excited. "Marcus," she said, "you need to sit down." That usually means either really good news or terminal illness. Definitely the first one. Papers shuffled on her end. We subpoenaed HOA accounting records. And Cynthia's been moving money through 3 separate LLCs connected to properties acquired after harassment complaints. I leaned back slowly in Vernon's old kitchen chair while rain tapped against the windows. "How bad is it?" Naomi actually laughed once under her breath. "Federal bad." According to the records, Cynthia and her husband weren't just intimidating homeowners. They've been deliberately tanking property values through lawsuits and fines, then buying those homes quietly through shell companies tied to the bank. They've done it 5 times in 7 years. One couple lost nearly $300,000 selling under pressure. Another family walked away so emotionally exhausted they practically abandoned their house. And every single deal somehow connected back to Cynthia Mercer. But the worst part? She'd been using HOA funds to help finance it. Residents were unknowingly paying for the legal harassment, destroying their own neighbors. I sat there staring out toward the lake for a long time after Naomi explained everything. The water looked calm, peaceful even, which felt insane considering how much greed and fear had been hiding underneath it all. There's more, Naomi added carefully. The FBI contacted our office this morning. That got my attention fast. The FBI? Bank Fraud Division. Apparently your little lake community triggered multiple financial reporting flags. I actually whistled. Well, that escalated. Marcus, she said seriously now, Cynthia Mercer is not thinking rationally anymore. You need cameras everywhere immediately. Turns out Naomi was right, because the following Saturday was the annual Blackwater Cove HOA meeting, and honest to God, it felt like walking into the final 20 minutes of a crime movie. The community center parking lot overflowed with luxury SUVs, golf carts, news vans, and neighbors whispering in tight nervous circles. Local reporters stood outside, near the entrance pretending not to eavesdrop, while absolutely eavesdropping. And parked right beside the building sat Cynthia's white Range Rover looking spotless as ever, though somehow sadder now. Like even the car knew its owner was doomed. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while homeowners filled rows of folding chairs. Cynthia sat at the front wearing a navy blazer and pearl earrings, posture rigid enough to cut glass. But her eyes looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Dale Mercer sat beside her sweating through his collar while pretending to review paperwork. Nobody spoke much at first, just nervous coughing, chair squeaks, quiet murmuring. Then Cynthia stood up and gave that polished HOA president smile one last time. Thank you all for coming. As many of you know, our community has recently faced misinformation attacks intended to destabilize property confidence. Oh, cut the crap, Cynthia. Everybody turned. Quiet old Leonard from Slip 3 stood slowly near the back, gripping a folder in both hands. Did you or did you not collect marina fees for years while refusing to pay the easement agreement? Cynthia froze. Just slightly. But enough. The board acted under legal advisement. That's not an answer, another voice snapped. Then another. And another. Suddenly years of fear cracked wide open all at once. Homeowners started standing up one after another like people waking from hypnosis. You threatened us over mailbox paint. You fined my daughter for sidewalk chalk. You told us Marcus was destroying the lake. You said Vernon Hale was dangerous. Cynthia tried regaining control, but panic had already entered the room. You could feel it spreading. Then the side doors opened, and 3 federal agents walked inside. Silence hit so hard you could hear fluorescent lights humming overhead. One agent approached, calmly holding a folder. Mrs. Cynthia Mercer? She stood slowly. Yes. You are under investigation for conspiracy to commit bank fraud, wire fraud, financial coercion, and misuse of community funds. The room exploded into chaos. Somebody gasped. One woman actually started crying. Dale looked like his soul left his body in real time. Cynthia stared around the room wildly, probably searching for somebody still loyal enough to save her. But nobody moved. Not one person. And honestly, that part hit me hardest. Because tyrants always think fear equals loyalty until the moment fear disappears. This is absurd, Cynthia snapped, voice cracking now. This man manipulated all of you. And she pointed directly at me. He came here to destroy this community. I stood up slowly, Vernon's old easement folder tucked under my arm. No, I said quietly. I came here because my uncle died. The room went still again. I came here broke, divorced, exhausted, hoping maybe this lake could help me start over. But instead I found out people had spent years weaponizing rules and fear against their own neighbors. Cynthia's face hardened. You think you're some hero? I shrugged lightly. Honestly, I think I'm just the first guy who refused to leave. That landed hard. You could feel it. The federal agents moved towards Cynthia and Dale, while reporters practically climbed over chairs trying to record everything. And as handcuffs clicked around Cynthia Mercer's wrists, she looked at me one final time with pure hatred burning behind her eyes. "This community will collapse without me," she hissed. Maybe once upon a time she believed that. But fear always tells people they're irreplaceable right before reality proves otherwise. 6 months later, Blackwater Cove barely resembled the same place. The HOA board got replaced entirely. Fees dropped almost 40%. Residents voted to turn the marina into a community cooperative instead of a private cash machine. Families who hadn't spoken in years suddenly held barbecues together near the shoreline. Funny how much friendlier neighbors become once nobodies threatening fines over grass height. As for me, I stayed, repaired the cabin, restored Vernon's marina, started dating Naomi eventually, which still makes Walter Briggs laugh every time he sees us together. And sometimes at sunset, I'll sit alone on the dock listening to water tap softly against the wood while thinking about Uncle Vernon. Truth is, he probably could have destroyed Cynthia years earlier if he wanted. But I think he understood something I didn't back then. Winning isn't really about revenge. It's about refusing to surrender your peace to people addicted to control. Still, I'll admit something controversial. Part of me wonders if Cynthia started out evil at all, or if power just slowly rotted her from the inside until she couldn't tell protecting the community apart from owning it. Honestly, I still don't know. And maybe that's the scariest part of this whole story. So tell me something down in the comments. If somebody spent years terrorizing your neighborhood but genuinely believed they were doing the right thing, does that make them a villain or just dangerous? And if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare yourself, trust me, I want to hear it. Because after everything that happened at Ash Pine Lake, I learned one thing real fast: the most expensive houses usually hide the ugliest secrets.